Given the Russian government's crackdown on free press inside its country and the steady stream of propaganda coming out of its state-controlled media outlets, it can be very difficult to gauge how Russians themselves are viewing this war. GZERO's Alex Gibson recently talked with Moscow-based sociologist Greg Yudin to get the Russian perspective.
How would you describe how normal Russians are viewing this ongoing conflict in Ukraine?
First of all, to a large extent, this is still a framing issue because many people are asking, what do Russians think about war? But if you approach Russians with this question, many of them would answer, what war? Because according to the official framing, there's no war. And I think still a lot of Russians are in denial, basically, trying to stick to this official interpretation.
How effective is the state-sponsored media operation currently? We've heard a lot about how effective it's been in the past, but at this moment, do you have a sense of how many Russians are still buying into the official narrative? And talk about some of the cracks that you're seeing.
I think it is relatively effective, but once again, it was planned on the assumption that it's not going to last too long. It was going to be a blitzkrieg with seizing Kyiv in 3 or 4 days, toppling the government, installing a pro-Russian regime. So basically, it was supposed to reveal what was so obvious to Vladimir Putin, that Ukrainians are willing to become part of Russia. And then you have a surprise. Just yesterday, that some commentators on the official state-run TV channels, some of those odious propagandists, are making some interesting comments. Well, one of them said, "Why are we not seeing huge support for Russian liberation there in Ukraine?" And he was not silenced. That is something already. And it demonstrates some initial cracks in this narrative. I wouldn't overestimate them because it is always possible to repair this, to reconfigure the narrative, but it will require some reconfiguration just because it is it's simply too difficult to not to acknowledge that there is a war in Ukraine. A lot of Russians have friends and relatives in Ukraine, and they keep receiving those messages, information about Russian soldiers being killed. And then there is a distortion of everyday life, of course. At this point, I would say that on the everyday level, Russians are still more concerned about, you have a long lines and the stores of the companies have announced that they are leaving Russia in 1 or 2 days. So this is the main concern, but it also indicates some cracks in the everyday life.
Do you think that the economic pressure exerted by the West are revealing these cracks more quickly than reports coming out of Ukraine because of how they impact everyday life?
You have to imagine how it all was planned. And the plan was, of course, to leave the everyday life intact. This is why it was supposed to be a very quick and successful operation. And by the end of it, nothing would have changed. Some sanctions perhaps would follow, but otherwise, no big change. So what might have an effect is a shock. The life that people are used to is there no more. And then it could backfire. But in order for that to happen, those retaliation measures have to be swift because they have to be destroying this everyday life just immediately.
Let's talk quickly about protest in Russia, which you're no stranger to. You were recently actually beaten and arrested at a protest in Pushkin Square in Moscow. Can you quickly just talk about what happened at that protest, and then more generally, protests taking form in Moscow and Russia today?
Honestly, I wouldn't want to talk too much about myself just because it's a minor episode. It is true, I was at a protest rally on the first day of the invasion, and I ended up in a hospital with a concussion. It took me several days to recover a little bit. But comparing to what is happening in Ukraine first, and then comparing to what is happening now to the people on the streets is just nothing. I mean, just yesterday we learned about an episode in St. Petersburg police station where when two girls were detained and they were told to take off their pants and to spread their legs by the police officers. Now, just several days ago in Moscow at a police station, a girl was heavily beaten up by police officers who were telling her, well, finally, Putin gave us a green light to beat you up. Now, why should I be talking about myself? I mean, it was a holiday compared to what I'm telling you now.
Well, given that and given the risks that protesters are facing, what does it mean to go out in the streets in Russia today and voice protest?
Obviously, it has a price. It has a price, and the price is getting higher and higher. And this is an indication that actually protests are worrying the power elite. This is why they went to impose a higher and higher price on those protests. But they're not decreasing. I wouldn't say they're really decreasing. We already have more than 15,000 people detained only from the start of the invasion, which is of course only a small portion of those who are in the streets, and is not going down. Many people are willing to pay any price at this point, first of all, because they understand what kind of atrocities happening now in Ukraine, and their country is associated with that. And then, of course, because their own country is destroyed by this. They spent years of their life trying to build a better Russia, and now it is completely demolished. So basically, their country is no more. So they have nothing to lose. So they're willing to take those risks.
What can protests accomplish given the great risks? And domestically, how do you see this ending?
Well, at this point, I think they're accomplishing a very big task, and this is a task of showing that the Russian society is currently divided, which is true. And this division becomes apparent because of those protests. It is there in the streets every day. And this division is obvious. It distorts the picture of unanimous support. There's not just a handful of people out on the street, a significant portion of people. And that creates, some incentives for parts of the elite, which are, of course, smart enough to understand what does it mean to the country. That creates some sort of incentives for them to mobilize. I think they are rather weak at this point, but maybe if it continues and if there are no real military successes, and as of yet we haven't seen none. So if the military situation remains bleak, if those protests continue, if those sanctions keep coming, destroying the everyday life, that could, create some sort of alliance between part of the elites and those progressive classes, which would perhaps have a chance of turning the tide.
Yeah, so grassroots protests might push the elites to make a change.
Let me give you one very clear message. I think what the world is facing right now at this point is the biggest threat in many, many decades, and perhaps in human history. I know some people in Europe, in America, and elsewhere are thinking of that as a local conflict, nasty as it is, but it is going to be resolved one way or another after Ukrainians conquer. This is not going to happen. This is a huge threat to Europe. This is going to escalate. This is going to lead to terrible consequences. And therefore, I think we have to really stand united and resolute about that, and be very, very clear and sober-minded about the danger that we're facing now. And in this situation, I think no risk is too high to take to oppose this beast. It has to be stopped now. It is very important to stop it now.
Greg Yudin, please stay safe, and thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.